Hey guys, welcome back to The Joy of Wrenching. I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic, and today in the shop we've got this 2011 GMC 2500, big 3/4 ton truck. And like many of these trucks, these big heavy trucks, when they get a few miles on them, the front suspension, steering pieces start to get a little bit of play in them, and that's the problem with this one. It's got a little too much play in the idler arm. It's got a little bit too much play in the pitman arm. So I'm going to show you how to change those out, and also the tie rod ends and the sway bar end links, because all of that's getting kind of wore out. I'm going to show you how easy it can be with the right tools and the right attitude to get these things done. So come along and let's get into it. So this truck has just got so much play in our steering linkage here. So if you look up here, you'll see that we've got our pitman arm coming out to this drag link, and I'm going to move this wheel side to side, and you'll be able to see that these two are clank, 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 moving side to side, independent of one another. Same thing's happening with this drag idler arm and the center link there. So watch what happens when I move these. So look and see if you see movement between these two as I turn the wheel back and forth. There should be no slop. That all should be nice and tight together. But you see that there's too much movement up in here inside of this little boot. So let me show you. You see that movement back and forth? Hopefully that captures it. Let's look now over at this side and look up in there and look for the same thing. Too much movement. As we're wiggling this back and forth, those should be moving in sync, and yet they're not. So we're going to go ahead and swap those out. One of the real bummers about this job is that in order to remove this pitman arm off of our steering gearbox, we're going to have to get this nut off of here and then pull that pitman arm down off of its shaft. And as you can see, there's just not very much room. I can't even put my hand in between where this is located and this piece of the frame, which is welded on. So this piece of the frame can't be removed. Now we can make a little bit more room for ourselves by lowering this sway bar. And so we're going to do that next. And since I'm also replacing these sway bar end links, you can see they're starting to get really dry rot. I'm going to go ahead and take these sway bars down and then ultimately out of the way and replace these links. We're also going to replace our tie rod ends here because they too have just got a little bit too much looseness and play to them, and they're starting to get pretty dry as well. These things are, relatively cheap. Get them on Rock Auto or whatever, and highly recommend anytime you're in here, especially if you're going to have to do an alignment anyway, might as well do these things and get you some fresh, nice, tight parts. This one you can see is really falling apart. So in order to get this sway bar down and swing it down out of the way, we're going to go ahead and undo its mounts from the frame here. These are 10mm bolts. There's 2 here holding this saddle, and then 2 on that side holding that end. So we'll go ahead and buzz those out. There's one. Nice big hefty bolt for a little bitty 10mm head, isn't it? I'll go ahead and I'll leave it in a couple threads just so it doesn't fall and bump me in the head. Let's go over here and buzz these 2 out. Gotta, I said so it wouldn't fall and bump me in the head, right? Ask me how I know. There we go. Okay, so now you can see this thing will just kind of fall down and hang out there because it's still held up in place by these sway bar end links. And look at all of this room now that we've got to at least access the nut that holds on our pitman arm to our steering gearbox. Now it's true, I kind of skipped ahead on you on one thing, so I want to touch on that real quick. Before you can see all of this stuff underneath here, there's a couple of belly pans, little skid plate type protectors down here that I've got on the ground that go up underneath here. And they're just held in with these bolts. Okay, so there's 2 in the front, 2 on this cross member, and 2 back here on this cross member. And that will get those 2 skid plates down and out of your way so that you can get access to all of these parts way easier. So while we've got this sway bar kind of hanging out here, I think we'll take the opportunity to go ahead and remove this end link here. So it's 15 millimeter nut on the back here and 15 millimeter headed bolt down below, and we'll just buzz this sucker off of here. There we go. That just comes right out of the way. You can go ahead and just lift this up, leave it kind of hanging there, and we'll go ahead and replace these parts. So I got these new parts, the sway bar end links. These are a Dorman product. I thought, man, that looks heavy. They call them heavy duty, and it looks pretty heavy duty. Plus it's red, so it looks kind of cool. We're going to try and put these in here and see how this does. So the instructions say to make sure that this barrel nut, they call it, goes into the top through the sway bar end. So let's see how this goes. All right, something like that. So that has to come in from the top, and it says that you know, make sure that this is all in the position it is in. So we'll take it apart as they have given it to us. Yeah, we'll go ahead and try to keep these two together as well. Okay. Other thing that it says is there's this little sleeve, and that's supposed to be between these two bottom bushings. So it comes up in here. We'll go ahead and put our bottom bushing back in place, and then the washer, and this central sleeve here. Push that bushing back down. There we go. And then up top, we've got another washer and our bushing. And you see how the bushings are shaped kind of like a Lego man head or something like that. You want to make sure that these little nubs that go up or whatever go towards one another and towards whatever you're bolting it up through. So that goes there. Stay. I gotta go retrieve the piece I just dropped. Oh man. But here we go. All right, got her. And then this says that metal sleeve should go down through our sway bar, and we will put it there. We'll try and get it started. This is a little different design. This upper part here is a nut. Kind of interesting. Looks like I'm going to have to hold that in some certain way. But there you go. So that's together. This gets tightened to 20 foot-pounds, it says in the instructions, and so I'll go ahead and do that later. But right now, we're going to leave things a little loosey-goosey, but that's how you put on new sway bar end links. No problem at all. And for this job, really, if you're just doing the sway bar end links, you don't really have to take the saddles down. You can leave that up there. Just lift this up out of the way and replace the end link. So this job is really easy and something that will make a huge difference if your car bushings are boogered up. Now that we've got our sway bar down, kind of out of the way, we're going to use a wrench on this nut. What we're trying to do here is avoid what a lot of people say you should do, which is to remove this steering gearbox. There are 3 bolts that go through the frame from this direction, 1, 2, and 1 up top, that hold this up against the frame. Then the steering gearbox itself is attached to your steering shaft. It goes up to your steering wheel, and then it has a couple of hydraulic lines coming to it. I'm going to try and do this in a little bit of an easier way. I've given myself some access, and I've got a big wrench here. I'm going to see if I can't bust loose this nut with this wrench. If I can just bust loose the nut and spin it off of here, then maybe, just maybe, we can get this pitman arm off of the steering gearbox and put the new one on without having to fool around with trying to remove our steering gearbox. So let's see how this goes. Got me a BFH here, and we'll just give it a few loving taps here. Let's see. I think either it slipped off or it felt like something turned. Let's see. Maybe it, yeah, that's turning. There you go. So this thing is turning. Hopefully you guys can see that. And that I didn't pre-loosen this or anything. This is, I was able to tap it off with a big crescent wrench. There we go. Now I did pre-soak it a little bit with some PB Blaster ahead of time, anticipating that it might be a little bit difficult. But look at there. So this thing will come off of here, or at least it will loosen. The other thing we need to see now, is there enough room underneath it to slip this nut off and out of the way? So let's find out. We'll be able to tell that here shortly. There we go. Come on, baby, have enough room. Think we're gonna make it, guys? I sure hope so. I sure hope so. Because I did not want to have to move this steering gearbox. Almost to the end of the threads now. Come on, please, baby, baby, please. I say that, you know, maybe I'll get this nut off of here. Oh, doggone it. Look at there. Nope, it's trapped. And, you know, even if I did get this off, I would still have to raise this at least in order to get that pitman arm off of there. And I'm going to show you a shortcut on getting this pitman arm off here in a minute. Well, as I showed you, it looks like in order to get this pitman arm down, we're going to have to raise up our steering gearbox a little bit. To make that easier, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this pitman arm end from our drag link. And in order to do that, we're going to have to buzz off this bolt or that nut right there, and it's a 24. Unfortunately, my deep socket isn't quite deep enough to really grab hold of that, so I'm going to have to use a wrench to loosen it up and get that nut at least started down a little ways before I can put this socket on there and finish it off. Really, it wasn't on there too terribly tight, so that's good. Like I said, I'm just going to try and loosen this thing up so that I can put that socket on there. And even though that socket might not have a full bite on the nut, if this nut is loose enough, it should spin it off. And as I loosen it, it's coming down the stud just a little bit, so I should be able to get a little bit more of a bite. Let me see if I can get this ratcheting wrench end on here and see if this will work. Ugh. This is my biggest ratcheting wrench. It's kind of cool to get to use it. It's very rare that you use a ratcheting wrench on a 24 millimeter nut, but it is working. Let's see if we can get that socket on it now. There we go. So like I said, part of making jobs like this easier and more enjoyable, you want to keep that joy in wrenching, is use the right tools and take your time. Don't get too frustrated. You know, if something doesn't work out, try a different way. There's usually 2 or 3 different ways to do just about anything. You know, many ways to skin the cat. Now, we're going to take this idler arm. We're going to loosen the pitman arm now off of our drag link. And in order to do that, you've got this stud sticking down through that drag link that's been there for a long time. And it's kind of like a tie rod end or anything like that, where you've got a stud, you know, wedged in, basically. You're going to need a special puller in most cases. And so I'm going to try and use this ball joint puller, idler arm puller, pitman arm puller, whatever you call, that comes from this kit here. And I can put a link to this kit in the description. This one's an OMT, just different front end service kit, they call it. It's got different pullers, ball joint press, separator. And I'm going to try this and see how this works for our job right here. We're going to see if this thing will help us get this out of there. All right, let's see how this goes. So basically you want to take these two little teeth and set them up in that gap between the two parts. And then you'll take your cup separator there. And you want this to be on there while those are up in there. Let me hold it in place and get it going with my fingers at least to start with. There we go. That's just kind of holding it in place, and then we're going to tighten this in. See what size that is. Too small. 17. Okay, so we're going to tighten this in with our 17 millimeter wrench. And let's see what happens. Now you can use an impact for this, but I'm just going to start it and just kind of get a feel for how things are going with a regular wrench. If it works, we ought to hear a big pop. And that pop means either our tool broke, the tooth slipped off, or it actually separated the two parts. So let's hope for a pop that is a good thing. Well, there's our pop, and what happened? Hey, look at there. It actually worked. It separated our pitman arm from our center drag link. So this tool for the win, guys. So highly recommend. Get you one of these for that job. Save yourself some headaches. So now that we've got our pitman arm disconnected from our center drag link, it's also connected to this idler arm, which we're going to replace. So we're going to undo this nut here and then repeat that process of separating the stud from our center drag link. All right, let's get this nut out of here. It's a 24 millimeter as well. There we go. Now we need to separate these two, and we're going to use our tool again. That same tie rod slash idler arm slash everything separator. So we'll put that in place, tighten up this center piece until we've got it touching. There we go. Okay. Let me get you a different angle for this. How's that? That looks better. All right. And we're going to go ahead and repeat the process. We're going to tighten this center up. Okay. See what happens. And again, we're listening for that loud pop of either the tool breaking or preferably these two coming apart. Hey, there we go. All right. Well, guys, it worked. Look at there. Now our drag link is completely separated from this idler, which has play inside of this cup end, and it's making a kind of a clicking sound. Can you hear that? That's why you got a little bit of wiggle in your steering wheel. And by the way, that was the symptom of this, is that at highway speed, the steering wheel would kind of vibrate back and forth. And so it could be, when that happens, it could be parts like this idler, it could be tie rod ends, it could be worn out inner tie rods, it could be pitman arm, and in my case, I've got play in the pitman arm, I've got play in the idler, so I'm going to try and take care of all of that at the same time. Now we've freed up our pitman arm from our center drag link here. A little bit of wiggle in there, don't we? We got some play here in this end, and it sounds like there might be a little bit of play in the gearbox itself. But we're going to have to rotate that gearbox now this direction in order to, let me show you, in order to get this nut and then ultimately our pitman arms off of that shaft. So we're going to loosen up the bolts that hold this gearbox. We're going to try and rotate it like this, and then we're going to secure it in place so that we can kind of work on this pitman arm next. So let's see how this goes. That steering gearbox is held in with these three 24mm bolts from this side. So looking at the way that this steering gearbox is held against the frame, we've got these two bolts down here and there's one up top. Now notice this one here, it's got some casting that is inside of a cutout in the frame. So if I just want to rotate this thing, I need to rotate it around this point right here, that bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this bolt and the one up top, and then we're going to leave this one loose, and we're going to see if we can't rotate that whole thing around that point. Because if we left the one up top as the rotation point, this casting would run into that part of the frame there. You see, it wouldn't be able to move past it. This one doesn't have anything in the way, so once this is loose, it should be able to slide either direction. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, so as I mentioned on the other side, this one is captured, and so we're going to just loosen it up. This one up top here, we're going to remove, and this one down here we're going to remove. Now this fender liner is kind of in the way, but you can get that, kind of bend it out of your way a little bit with your extension if you need to. There we go. Just want to make sure that I'm on it really good. Woo! That thing's in there. This is where you're definitely going to want to use a big heavy-duty impact. Size 24mm again. Let's get this one now. Hopefully you can see it is turning. It's just really tight. Part of the problem is likely due to this extension, because extensions on an impact kind of absorb some of that impact, and so they don't allow you to work as effectively. Go ahead and take it off for this other one. I'll show you the difference. I'm just going to loosen this one, but that was a lot easier to loosen. Let's see if we can get in here and get this. There we go. Woo! Man, I tell you, if you do that with a wrench, you're going to have some muscles. So we just removed this bolt, or the bolt that comes through here, the frame. We just removed it, and we removed the one up top, but we left this one down here as our pivot point, just so that everything stayed kind of in place. And what we're going to see now is, can we rotate this whole kit and caboodle around to give us access to this nut and ultimately to remove that pitman arm. So let's see what kind of freedom that gave to us. So it looks like not too bad. I could probably get that nut off of here, but I don't know if I'll have enough room to get that pitman arm off of there. Yeah, I bet I could. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna rotate this thing down like this. Now, again, I haven't removed, let me show you. I haven't removed our steering linkage here. And you can see as I'm rotating this thing, there's enough give in that to move around. And I have not removed the hydraulic lines. There's plenty of room in that to allow them to move too. So we're just going to try and remove as little as possible here, keeping our job as easy and enjoyable as we can. All right, so now I'm going to rotate this thing, and then I'm going to tighten our pivot point bolt so that it holds it in that rotated place. I got my 24mm and an impact back here, and I'm going to pull down on my pitman arm. That helps me rotate this sucker. Now I'm going to tighten it. Okay, look at there. So see how when you tighten it, it holds it in that rotated position so that you can get to this nut that holds that pitman arm on easier, and then ultimately to the pitman arm itself. So now the nut is able to slide out, and maybe, just maybe, we'll have enough room for that pitman arm to slide out too. So it looks like our pitman arm is 1 inch thick, and we're gonna not have enough room, it looks like, to slide that off of here and then out of the way. So we're gonna still have to rotate this thing or finagle it in some way. May have to loosen that bolt and kind of tilt it a little bit as well, but we're gonna try and keep as much of that connected as possible and get this pitman arm off of here. But the first step we need to do is loosen this pitman arm from the steering gearbox shaft that it's attached to. And this will be wedged on here to the dickens. I mean, like nothing. These things are married to one another. This is going to be really, really hard to pull off of there. Now, they have these tools designed to help with that, but you can't get it in here, right? We can't get up in there with this, which needs to have this little stud down on the shaft, but we can't get in there, and we can't rotate it unless we disconnect our steering shaft, which we may ultimately have to do. But we're not reusing this pitman arm, and I'm going to show you that there is an easier way, because even if you do rotate this such that you can get one of these pitman arm pullers on here, this is a bear, even with the right tool. And I want to show you an easier way. So here's where things are going to get a little messy. I've got a cutoff wheel jacked up in this tool here. That's what we're going to do to make this job easier, is we're going to cut our pitman arm off. In order to do that, we're going to relieve the stress or the strain that this thing has, the grip that it has on that shaft right there, by giving it a relief cut right in here. Now you can do this with an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel in it. I just happen to have this tool, kind of a glorified Dremel, so to speak. This is a 3-inch blade, metal cutting blade. And you can use a 2-inch, you could use the 4-inch, but the bigger you go with it, the more it's going to contact the steering gearbox before it cuts a large way through the pitman arm. So I decided to go with this 3-inch. I've got a 2-inch over there on the table in case I need it. And of course, as I use it, this 3-inch is going to shrink in size anyway. So let's see how this goes. Not too bad so far. Look at that, pretty decent cut into it. And we're going to go ahead and continue until something happens. The sparks are definitely sharp and hot. So you're going to want to protect yourself. While I'm thinking about that, let me get some more protection. All right, I'm more protected now. I got my sleeves on. So I found these tattoo sleeves. I thought, man, that looks cool. And it protects your arms from flying sparks or even grease and grime. You're reaching your hand up inside of that engine and you come back and you might have gloves on, keep your hands clean, but then your arms are coated with grease and whatever, and you're going to go and take your best girl out for a night out, and you don't want to have grease stains all the way up to your underarms. So get you some of these cool sleeves. Plus, nobody messes with you when you're wearing them. They think you're some kind of bad biker. You know, of course, here I am talking safety. I got my mask on, I got my hearing protection in, I got the gloves, I got the sleeves, and then what? The fool's in flip-flops. I know. What can I do? All right, so let's get to it. Let's get back to it. All right, guys. I'm going to say these angle grinders from Ryobi, and this is the HP. This is the brushless version. Got a good battery, plenty of charge on my battery, and yet it overheats way too quickly and stops. Not the best choice. There it goes again. Just got to unplug the battery, plug it back in, and you're good to go again. Very frustrating though. You know, even with these problems with my battery, this is making really short work of that thing. So it'll cut through there pretty easily if you've got a more reliable tool. Air die grinder or something like that. Okay, so we did a few more cuts here, and hopefully you can see up in there that we've cut pretty much through this pitman arm. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try and, you know, did a little nick on the side of this steering gearbox, but stop before you get to the threads or the splines of the thing. And we're going to try and see if this thing will just fall right off of here if we hit it from above with a hammer, punch, chisel. You could probably even put a chisel in here or some sort of wedge, try to spread that out and then let it fall off. So let's see how this goes. All right, so first thing I want to try is a little wedge here. Got a little wedge chisel, and I'm going to stick that in that gap that I've just carved in there, and I'm going to whack on it with this hammer and see if we can get it to just kind of spread out a little bit. Okay, you know, I think that seems to be working. Now, let me just see if we get lucky and tap this thing. I need to tap it from above, but it's kind of an awkward angle. You can kind of come down through the top with, you know, like a pry bar or something, or a chisel or something like that from above. But while I'm thinking about it, let me put a pry bar between here and that steering gearbox and see if that'll separate the two. We'll come in here and we'll just see what happens if we just give it a little love. Little push down here. Now it's trying to rotate the whole steering gearbox because I don't have it secured very well with that one nut there. I can't really get a good angle of the dangle here, but we'll see what we can do. Goodness gracious. All right, so it's not coming apart as easily as I had hoped quite yet. What I got to do is give it a little love tap or two here. Let's give it a love tap or two here, just kind of like a tie rod end or whatever. We're going to try and shock it a little bit and see if it'll release some of the grip that it's got on it. I'm going to go ahead and back in here with our little chisel again. Okay. Hopefully that's all kind of spread out. And I'm going to leave that in there. Kind of got it wedged in there. We'll go back with our pry bar again. And we're just going to see if we can get... Hey, looky there, guys. Woohoo! Score. There it is. So now we have our pitman arm off. Well, looks like I went in and scored a little bit of the splines. No big deal. It's not boogered up to the point where won't be able to slide the next one on there. But this saves you so much heartache getting one of these things off of here. Just relieve the stress, because man, you see that wedge shape? That thing is held onto that wedge shape like nobody's business. Now we just got to figure out how to rotate this gearbox so that we can get the pitman arm out of the way. We'll go ahead and get our chisel freed up. Come here. There we go. All right, I went ahead and I loosened up our pivot bolt again, And that just gives me a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of play in this steering box. And I'm going to try and move that steering box around however I have to in order to get this pitman arm out of here. Oh, almost, there it is. So loosening up that pivot, pushing up on the front, and out she came. There we go. So you can see how I cut right through that booger. But man, I tell you, this will save you a ton of effort and make life a whole lot easier. Hey guys, if you like these videos and I'm helping you out, please do me a favor too and hit that subscribe button. It's not going to sign you up for any junk mail or anything like that, but what it does is it really helps us to reach a greater audience with our video content and help other people out. So thank you guys again for watching. Let's get back to it. Whew, man, I tell you, that was some job, but I tell you, with the right tools, a little bit of technique, you can do it and save yourself a ton of headaches. So that worked out, and now we're going to put a new pitman arm in. I want to show you. So I really like Moog as a brand. They make really good products. Here's our old pitman arm. Here's our new one. What is this part number? AXXK440019. All right, whatever. Let's take a look at this piece here. Compare it to our old one. Make sure that we've got the right part. And you know, they look similar. We can screw in our grease zerk there. Let's see how many splines. Does that all look about the right same size? It does. So we're going to see if we can't get this one up in place. We're going to have to monkey with the steering gearbox again in order to slide this up under there, but I think we learned how to do that before. So I'm going to have to push up on this side and kind of come in from the back with the new pitman arm just enough to where I can slide the thickness. There it is. All right, there we go. And then you want to line up. There's a fat spline, a fat spline every so often on this thing. You see that one right there is a fat spline just to the right of this cut. And there will be another one over here on this side and another one over on that side. And there's some like that on the inside. Grab that. Some like that, fat ones on the inside of the pitman arm. So those have to line up. So just kind of rotate it around until those line up, and then that's how you'll know that you've got it in the right orientation. Oh, I've got it upside down. Well, let me flip this thing over. That would have been bad. Secure this thing upside down. Okay, come on. Flip it over and back into place. There we go. And I'm going to rotate it around until there we go. And you'll feel it. It'll go in there way easier once it's lined up. See that? And now we're ready to go back together with our washer and our nut that came off of here. And then we'll have to tighten it up quite a bit. You can see where the old one was by that witness marking there. All right, let's get our washer up in here on the stud. And then we'll put our nut back into place. And we're going to have to rotate this thing up to give ourselves some room again. Try and do this all with one hand and keep my hands out of your line of sight. It's a little bit tricky, but it's worth it because I want you guys to learn from this the way that I did. And again, I'm trying to keep the joy in wrenching. I want to find the easier ways for everything so that we can do our jobs a little bit more enjoyably and have better attitudes about it. So normally when you drop a bolt or a nut or whatever, you get a bad attitude, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm not going to let it steal my joy. All right, let me put this back together. All right. I apologize if my hand gets a little bit in your line of sight here. As I mentioned, I kind of need to have my fingers in this area to tighten this little nut. There we go. Okay. Got it started. And these things, as long as your threads are clean, these things should spin on pretty easily. And you want to make sure that you get your pitman arm lined up the way it was, so that when we put our drag link back up there, we'll be able to connect these two back together. So before I go tightening up everything on the pitman arm here, I'm going to go ahead and reconnect the mounting points for the steering gearbox, reconnect our bolts, through bolts that hold it to the frame, and get all of that back together. And that way this will all hold steady while we put some torque on this nut to tighten that thing up. And with most stuff on the suspension and steering, you want to make sure you use some Loctite, just so these really important bolts don't ever work themselves loose. Let's try and line this thing up and get everything started again. Come on, baby. There we go. That one feels like it's gripping. And, you know, leaving that one connected makes this, you know, finding the hole a lot easier. Once you got it started by hand, you can go ahead and use your impact, kind of buzz it down a little bit. This one's kind of tucked up behind that plastic. I'm going to have to use an extension. These are 24 mil. There we go. Tighten all of them. And we're just sucking these things up. We'll torque them by hand. The torque on these is probably 8 million foot-pounds or something like that. If I can find it, I'll post it below. But you can see that blue Loctite will help these things from not backing out. I'll go ahead and torque these things here, and then we'll move ahead and try and tighten this nut. All right, bear with me while I tighten up this nut that holds the pitman arm on. Again, we got this giant crescent wrench. I don't know what size this nut is. If you guys do, leave a comment down below for the guys. I don't know what torque spec's supposed to be on this thing, but I guarantee it's going to be large in both cases. And as I'm tightening this, it's going to want to rotate. So I may wait and tighten it the rest of the way once I get the other side of this pitman arm reattached to our center drag link here. All right, let's see if we can get lucky and get this thing connected to our drag link again. We'll take off our protective caps here. Comes with a new nut, which is nice. And we'll take this drag link. We're gonna have to rotate the tire, or the knuckle a little bit, so that we can get it a little bit further towards the passenger side. Let's do that. There we go. Let's see how that looks. So we're gonna have to line up this hole with our stud here. There we go. That wasn't too bad. And we'll go ahead and start the nut on, keep it in place, and then we'll go ahead and tighten that thing up here in a second. We'll go ahead and leave it loose for now. We'll go ahead and leave that loose for now, and we'll go ahead and start and remove and replace our idler arm over here, which is held in by a couple of bolts, through bolts with nuts on the back. You see that? That side, and here's what it looks like on this side. So we're going to remove these bolts, slide this out, and it's already disconnected from the drag link, and then we'll slide the new one in and bolt it in place. Here's our idler arm. And once it's disconnected from this drag link, you can kind of push it over the side and you get good access to these through bolts that hold it into this little part of the frame, this little bracket back here. And these bolts that hold it on the back side, the nuts are 24 millimeter. On the front side, it's an 18 millimeter. I don't know why they do that, but they did. So we'll go ahead and we'll hold the back and we'll come around here to the front and see if we can't use our impact and buzz those bolts out. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can't loosen this up. Now I'm going to go for the harder one first. I don't know about you guys, but I usually like to try for the harder one first, because if I can get that one, then I can get the other one, no problem. And that wasn't too bad, actually. Of course, I've got a breaker bar on this thing, and I've got 18 in the front, 24 millimeter in the back, and we can probably get that out with an impact. Now, let's see about this guy, if it wants to break loose for us. Let's go ahead and move our 24 backer here. Okay. Oh yeah, not too bad. Not too bad at all. All right, both of those are loose now. Not loose enough to turn by hand, but definitely loose enough to use the impact on with an extension. So that's what we're going to do. We'll come in here and we'll go back to our more difficult of the two. Put the backer on there. Come on, there we go. All right. We'll hold that in place and we'll see if we can't get this guy loose. There we are. Okay. Did it slip off? Oh, slipped off. Let me get to the back. There we go. Let's try that again. Okay. That looks like it might have loosened up. Yeah. All right. Now let's get the other one. Go. All right, now these are loose. We can remove them. There we go. Pretty hefty bolts. Definitely want to use some Loctite when you put these back together. And let's see if this guy wants to come out easily for us or not. Kind of wedged into its pocket there, so we may have to give it a little persuasion, but that's okay. That's part of the joy of wrenching, isn't it? It's using the big ugly tools to move things around when they want to be play hard to get. Here we go. Get our pry bar in there. Wiggle this booger out of here. There we go. Okay. Let's see how that goes now. There we go. And there is our idler arm out of the way. Okay. Old versus the new. Another nice Moog part here. Pretty heavy duty, well made. I noticed the old one here. Look how easy it is to maneuver this thing flopping around. I can feel clicking in this end right here. This one here, nice and tight, and I cannot twist this thing. I'm going to have to mount it up in place before I can twist it to the right direction. So let's go ahead and try and do that. Let's put it up into its home there, and I'll bring you along. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this. We'll go back up in here, just like so, and we need this to be pointed that direction. Like I said, it's too hard to twist it. There we go. I can do it. It just takes a lot more force than the other one. There we go. All right, that's a little better. Now, take this thing, set it up into place. It too may need a little bit of persuasion to kind of wedge it back in to this pocket that it came out of. I'm going to do that with a, what do you think, guys? Maybe a hammer? Tap, little love taps. Kind of an awkward area, really can't swing it. You want to hit it sort of right in the center of the thing, and it's kind of an awkward area to try and use a hammer. So what I may do is try to spread this little part of the bracketry out so it slides in a little easier, or I might just try to use a pry bar somewhere safe that's not going to crack against the block and try and wedge it in. That's probably the easier thing to do. So let's try that. Let me see if I can get this in here. Looking for something to pry against that's not going to be breakable. There's a good heavy duty part of the engine there. Let's see if we can get this thing to slide over using that leverage. It's surprisingly difficult, so I don't know. Try a different angle. Just looking for something that I can pry against, not having too much luck. I'll bring you back when I figure this out. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen this little pocket out a little bit so that the new idler arm will fall in there a little bit easier. And what I'm decided to try to do is use a long pry bar here and just kind of hammer it away on the backside there. And what that's going to do, hopefully, is open that pocket up just enough to where it'll allow the new part to slip in there a little easier. So let's see if that helps. Put this new part up in here like so. Hey, look at that. No problem at all. Hey, there you go. So another tip for you guys. That worked really slick. Let's get those bolts back in it with some Loctite. Let's tighten these bolts up. Torque spec, probably pretty high. I'll put a number down below if I can find it for you. Anytime you got a really heavy duty bolt, chances are it's going to have a high torque spec, especially if it's on a heavy duty car. Suspension. I've got Loctite on this bolt, and the nut on the back also is a special design that won't back off. That feels about right. Go ahead and tighten this other one. A lot of people say, well, it's about, 5 ooga doogas, meaning that you got to really strain 5 times in order to tighten it enough for it to be in torque spec. So these are probably some 5 ooga doogas, whereas the ones that were holding on the steering gearbox, those are probably more like a 8 to 10 ooga dooga bolt. There we go. Really like this ratcheting extension bar, breaker bar. Found it at some tool show somewhere. I forget who makes it, but you can get one online. They're just handy as heck, especially in a situation like this. You need to put some oomph on it, and you don't want to have to keep trying to re-grab it and move it around. There we go. That idler arm is reattached. All right. So let's see what it's going to take in order to get this idler arm back into its home in our drag link here. Oof, that's a good tight joint now. All right, I'm going to get the new nut just in case we're able to put it up in there. We want to be able to hold it in place. So we'll try and line these things up. May have to move it over just a little bit like that. There we go. Push it up into place, and then you can get your new nut. And this is a castellated one, so it comes with a cotter pin that we're going to want to stick. Once we tighten this thing up, we're going to want to torque this to spec and then put a cotter pin through there in order to hold it in place you guys know what I'm talking about with a cotter pin. We'll put that in there, and then we'll bend these little ears out so that that can't come loose. Okay, so we've got our idler arm torqued in place back here. Torqued in place. We got our cotter pin keeper there. Now let's go down over here and let's try and secure this nut that tightens up our pitman arm to our center drag link. So let's see what it's going to take to get that. And just in case this whole stud starts to spin, they've given us a chance or a way to hold it in place while we tighten that nut. But we're going to buzz it up there with the impact and see if it'll just at least get tight for us. So let's see what happens. Let me get you in a good position with the light. There we go. Now it was spinning, but the nut was spinning a little bit faster, and so it did come up. And of course, this is too long. The shaft is too long for my socket. It slipped off of the nut. So I'm going to have to go to my 24-inch wrench to tighten that up. That's a little frustrating, but at least now I know that I need to get another tool, a longer socket. That's how I know when it's time to buy another tool, is when I run into a situation like that where I need something just a little bit longer. There we go. Let's tighten this thing up as much as we can with our ratcheting wrench, and then we'll use the regular type of wrench, because a ratcheting wrench, the little gears inside of here just aren't all that tough. And so if this thing's supposed to have a lot of torque on it, you're definitely not going to want to use a ratcheting wrench for that. I'll get her tightened up. We'll go ahead and tighten up this nut here. And I don't know if I've said this yet. You know, if you're going to be cranking on anything and you got a vehicle, you got a vehicle up in the air, it doesn't matter if it's on a lift or on jack stands or whatever, if you're going to be monkeying with something, really cranking on it, trying to, you know, break loose bolts or whatever, please do yourself and everybody a favor and use extra support underneath the vehicle. So, you know, I'm using a lift. It's taken me 50 years to get it. So it's a great thing, let me tell you. But if I was on the ground, I'd have jack stands all over the place, and I'm using them here, you know, supporting this lift front and back, because this is a big heavy truck, and you go to monkeying on it and you could pull it off of the jack or pull it off of the single stands that you might have. So just be safe, guys, and you know, go home alive. Get this thing tight. Again, this is why I've got all of that support on here. And you can see as we're tightening it up there, we're sucking this thing up to where it's back where it was, or at least where the other one was. All right. At some point here, I'm not going to be able to just use this thing by itself. I'm going to have to start using some persuasion. So if you got yourself an extension of some kind, you know, a big pipe or something you can put on the end of the thing, you can do that. I'm just going to beat on it with a hammer, help it to keep moving. You probably can't over torque something like this. If I can find the torque spec for it, I'll pull it up and post it down below. But you know, I'm sure it's a couple hundred pounds, 175 to 200 something pounds. So again, you're not going to do that. You're not going to have to worry about over torquing it. Woo, we're getting there, guys. So this is tight. We've got our new pitman arm attached, nice and tight. We've got our new idler arm attached, nice and tight. Everything's torqued. And so now we can go ahead and take our sway bar, which we kind of let flop down here out of the way so that we could get to those bolts and everything, we're going to go ahead and reattach the sway bar. And now that our center drag link is all connected to pitman arm, idler arm, we'll go ahead and move out here and replace our outer tie rod ends. In order to get this thing off of here, we're going to have to loosen this jam nut that's used to extend and shrink in this distance for alignment. And so you're going to get yourself a 24 millimeter wrench, stick it on there, and this one is going to go towards the back, towards the cab. You can hold the inner tie rod. And all you got to do is just loosen it enough to where it is no longer grip and hold of this thing. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to disconnect our outer tie rod from the knuckle here, and then we're going to spin it off and spin a new one on. Next step in this process is going to be breaking this nut loose off of here, and it's a 21 millimeter. I'm going to use the impact, just make things a little easier, and hope that it go ahead and buzz it off. Hey, all right. So if you find that you're trying to take this off and the stud itself is spinning, you may have to hold that stud with a wrench or something like that to keep that from happening. We'll go ahead and now we'll try and separate our outer tie rod end from this knuckle. And there are tools to do that, or the easiest way, which I always like to show you guys the easy way, is to get your trusty hammer back again. Here it is. And we're going to strike this knuckle only. You don't want to strike that. You want to strike the knuckle right here. And that shock from hitting it with the hammer is going to loosen up the binding, the two parts there. So let's go ahead and get you situated so that you can see that. Make sure that we got you in frame, and I'll give it a few whacks here with the hammer, and it'll just fall out whenever it releases. Kind of an awkward angle, so I'm going to go ahead and move my wheel a little bit so that I get a better striking position. There we go. That way I can swing that hammer in here at a different angle. There we go. Well, it's on there good. So every once in a while, I'm going to give it a little tap up here. Just to kind of remind it what I want it to do. There we go. Took a little persuasion, but out she came. Now that it's released from the knuckle, you can kind of swing this out of the way, and we loosen this jam nut here so that we can spin this outer tie rod end off of the inner tie rod. And so you just hold the inner tie rod steady, and then you spin it and count how many spins it takes. There's 1 revolution, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27 and a half. 27 and a half turns to remove the old one. That's how many turns it should take to put the new one on. All right, so we got our new part here, just the same as the old one. Again, we're going to go with Moog, really good heavy-duty brand for suspension parts. And we'll get it out of the bag here. And you can see that the new one is stiff as can be. You're not going to be moving that thing around, but look guys, this is why you replace them. They get wallered out over time. And even though it's got a grease fitting, and even though there's grease in there, these things just don't last forever. So good that we're replacing that. And we'll go ahead and take our new one and thread it on there just the same way that we took it off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So just about the same number of turns. And we'll go ahead and take this sucker and put it back where she goes. You can just rotate this thing. Now this is going to have to get a little bit more angle there. There we go. Oh, all right. And now we'll get our nut that came with it. This is another castellated nut. So it comes with the castellated nut and a cotter pin to hold it in. And then also a grease fitting that we will screw in down here. And then when we're done with all of this stuff, we'll grease all of these Zerk fittings. Go ahead and we'll do that here in a minute. I'll just set it there. We'll get this nut on top. You want to tighten this thing up to spec, and I'll leave the torque spec down below if I can find it. And then we're going to put our cotter pin in there to hold it in place. All right, we got that nice and tight. We got our cotter pin in there to secure it. Now we'll go ahead and finish up this side with its tie rod end and tighten this little jam nut. So again, 24 millimeter wrench, give it a good tightening. And then you want to not leave this bound over at an angle like that, but to just straighten it back up. You see, I'm not loosening that nut, I'm just using it to straighten this angle between my outer tie rod and knuckle. And I'll go ahead and go to the other side and we'll replace that other outer tie rod. But before I do that, I'm going to show you how to tighten up one of these new Dorman stabilizer end links. So we're ready to tighten up our stabilizer end link here. This is one of those new ones from Dorman, and I'm finding that this upper barrel nut, they call it, is easiest to hold with just a adjustable wrench or crescent wrench. And then down here, we're going to tighten up this bolt that goes all the way through to that nut. This is a 15 millimeter. So let's hold this crescent up here, and then we're going to use our impact to buzz that 15 millimeter tight. And you want to tighten these things up until you start to see some squish of these bushings on either side of the sway bar and the lower control arm here. So I'll show you what that looks like. You see I'm starting to squish down. There we go. That's good enough. This is supposed to be torqued down to 20 foot-pounds, so not very much. Hey guys, thanks for sticking it out with us. I know that was a lot, but if you're going to do part of the steering system on one of these big heavy-duty trucks because one piece is worn out, this thing's got a little over 120,000 miles or something like that. You know, the parts just wear out, you know, and so it's good to go ahead and replace as many of them as you can. And so I wanted to show you how to do all of it. It's a little easier sometimes when you do them all at the same time too, instead of one little piecemeal at a time. And, you know, while something's down, you can fix it and get to other things behind it, as we saw. So today, just as a reminder, we did the outer tie rod ends, we did the sway bar end links, we did our idler, turn the light on there, we did our idler, we did our pitman arm, and I showed you the easy ways to get to that. Everything's nice and torqued, everything's got a securing cotter pin or Loctite if necessary. We've got everything greased that has a grease fitting, and the only thing left really is we're going to put these belly pans back up, these skid pans back up to protect everything, and go out there and get it aligned. You know, you do something like this, you know, this much work, any kind of front end type work, you definitely need to get it aligned afterwards. You know, we counted how many rotations we took the tie rod ends off and put them on the exact same spot because they went up and bumped up against those stops, which we left in that place for that reason. But you're still going to need alignment. And so I'm ready to go out there and see if I feel a difference and see if that shimmy that I had at about, highway speed, 55 mile an hour or so, it would kind of shake like this. See if that shimmy goes away now, because I definitely found some worn out parts. There was a lot of play. I've got all these parts left over down here at my feet. A lot of play in the outer tie rod ends, the idler, and the pitman. So this is going to tighten it up a whole lot. If it doesn't fix my shimmy, it sure should fix most of it. I bet you this is going to be good. So I will get back with you and let you know how it goes. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to put some chapters in here because I know it's long, and that way you can skip to what you want to see, or maybe break it up. I don't know what I'll end up doing, but I thank you guys that stuck through to this end. I hope this helps you a lot. If so, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and I appreciate y'all's time. God bless.